Well, welcome. My name is Shawn Bose. I'm the new GM of Needcrime. But in my previous lives, I've actually founded 3 startups over the last 20 years, so I think I can relate to a lot of your journeys. And in that time, I've hired probably close to 1,000 technical folks. One of the most important factors in hiring people is a shared mission, something that everybody believes in. And indeed, this is our company mission, and one that I can relate to in terms of my own startup experience. One of the most rewarding parts of starting companies is all the jobs that you can create as you build them from small to large to larger. And my experience developing a platform like UShip that has almost 800,000 transport companies registered, empowering these companies to grow and operate their businesses, to provide meaningful work for people, was probably one of the most exciting parts of that mission. And that's what we do at Indeed. We help people get jobs. And this is something that is pretty appreciated by my fellow employees. This is a t-shirt that everybody gets on their first day. And often when they find themselves wearing it out in public, they all have a similar reaction. Someone comes out of the blue and tells them they've had an experience with Indeed, and gives them heartfelt thanks. This actually happened last week. I was here in San Francisco, and when I was checking into my hotel, the concierge said, "Hey, you work for Indeed. I got my job on Indeed." In fact, so did my father. And so, those are the type of real-world experiences that reinforces what you do and gives you sort of that energy to go back into the office and work on what you're working on. And it's working. Indeed is now the largest website on the internet, the largest one in the world. Every month we have 16 million jobs listed, 200 million visitors, and over 2 billion searches. But success is really measured in hires. And this is great for us so far because for the last 6 years we've been ranked #1 in actually providing candidates who got hired according to the third-party source Silk Road. So today I promised to talk about finding and retaining tech talent. So let's start with the finding. I'm not really good at this. Today, every company is essentially a software company. Google is the world's largest advertiser, Amazon is the world's largest retailer, and so on and so forth. And every single company is essentially, at its core, a technology business. Having worked in shipping and knowing FedEx intimately, for example, it's really their software and their ability to build off that software the most efficient logistics platform that gives them their advantage. 40% of the tech hires on Indeed actually don't go to companies that you would perceive as tech companies. For example, GE and Capital One have more software engineer openings than either Google or Facebook. Every company needs a lot of tech talent. This is great news if you're a software developer. It's not so great if you're trying to hire and retain them. And this is one of the big issues. 7 of the 10 hardest to fill positions globally are software jobs. And this is going to get worse. They predict that over the next 10 years, there'll be about 1.3 million new jobs in the United States that will require technical talent. Yet there will be only 400,000 new college graduates with computer science degrees over that same period of time. So what does this mean? Well, it really means that the qualified candidates are getting flooded with contacts. Our data reveals that the most experienced candidates are getting almost more than 1 contact a day, unsolicited. But at the same time, finding your dream job is almost impossible. There's a skill-opportunity mismatch. What's really happening is that complex interactions require people to be more and more specialized. In fact, according to the head of HR strategy at JP Morgan Chase, they're talking about super specialized skill sets traditional sort of software developer in general is not the thing any longer. They're not looking for jack of all trades. And this is something that's been happening in the industry as basically web development and web consumer companies have evolved over the last 20 years. When I started hiring people 15, 16, 17 years ago, there was an expectation that they would come in and that there would be time for them to develop the required skills they needed to be successful, and that the companies would also take that time to point and develop those skills that would match their business needs. That's not true anymore. Today, people want people to come in and provide impact immediately, which means you have to have specialized skills that fit a job description right out of the box. So there are a lot of highly skilled people, and they're chasing jobs with increasingly specific skill requirements. So I did this search last week, just to give an example. Software developer, San Jose, California. 7,000 plus jobs. That's a lot of jobs. So that's great news, right? A lot of jobs. But if you open these up, what becomes clear is that what people are looking for will exclude a lot of software developers because they're looking at very specific experience, both in tenure, but also look at the list of qualifications that this job is looking for. And this is happening more and more. So ultimately, matching jobs to job seekers is a really, really tough problem. And it requires us to understand a lot of the journey from both the employer and candidate side. This graphic is sort of an example of something where we use to understand these different phases from both the job seeker and the employer. On the candidate side, it often starts with introspection. What is meaningful work? What am I inspired by? And on the business side, you're really looking at your teams and saying, what skills do I need to add to these teams to meet my business goals? And as you go through these phases, ultimately, where is the hiring match made? These are difficult questions to answer. Indeed has 14 years of data, petabytes and petabytes of data that we are constantly analyzing, using layers and layers of AI and algorithms to try to bring structure to these issues. Location, salary, skill sets, all these things we're trying to understand at a deeper and deeper level to try to create a match. So what does this mean? Well, it means in the age of search, technology can match jobs and job seekers much better than human beings alone. So there's always going to be a place for these types of conferences, social networking, meetups, human referrals, but really it's time to look at some newer tools. And even in Indeed, with the best search tools, we were having trouble sourcing the tech talent that we needed. So this is where Needcrime actually was the genesis. We needed to figure out a better way. So we really help job seekers own their job search experience with Needcrime. But also, on the flip side, it helps us employers find top tech talent faster and easier. How do we do this? Well, we're looking for certain roles, obviously. So we have a vetted marketplace that matches top talent to employers. So we specifically source candidates who meet these types of roles: software engineer, network engineer, UX, UI, product managers, with the certain skill sets that people are looking for as we sort of analyze the jobs that are available. So this candidate selection process, what if you could basically take advantage of all of Indeed's resources here? So we're sourcing and vetting and finding out, are these the right types of candidates? But more importantly, are they active? Are they actually looking? What I said before about the top candidates getting inundated with requests, when they're not even really looking. So they have to be change-ready candidates. So they have to raise their hand and say, I am willing to look for a new role. These are specific types of companies I want to work for. These are specific types of locations I want to be in. And as we continue to improve, this is the culture of the company that I want to be a part of. All these things are going to matter. So making sure that they're active and change ready is a really big part of this. And we're trying to deliver it in a really easy to use tool where we're batching talent and employers with one another. So let's look at an actual profile. The names have been anonymized, but this is really interesting. So when you talk about top talent, Norn here is got all the bona fides you would need, right? He's went to the best schools, he's worked for the best companies, he's clearly going to be a hot commodity in the market. Everybody's going to try to reach out to him when he's change ready. And we have a lot of candidates with this background. They've worked at these companies where everybody feels like if you've been there, then you have the type of experience to hit the ground running. Or they've gone to some of the best schools. The top schools also sort of immediately get you vetted into being looked at and considered for these roles at top companies. But pedigree really isn't everything. Remember, we talked about this shortage. 1.3 million new tech jobs, 400,000 computer science graduates. So how do we make up that gap? So one of the things we've been doing is we've been putting out code tests, letting people go through different processes. Is this done? Is this better?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Sorry. Now I'm really loud. So for example, we use now coding tests so that we can find these hidden gems, essentially. So when we look at David here, again, anonymized, on first pass, you might say, well, he's a developer intern. He doesn't have the CS degree. He hasn't been working at a Google or a Facebook. But when we put him through different tests and we help vet them, we found out, for example, he was in the top 5% on a coding challenge in Python. So once we know that, we can now give David access to our marketplace where we can basically surface his profile to relevant jobs that match him. Even though if you just saw him on LinkedIn or if you just looked at his sort of standard resume, you might not understand that he's a perfect fit for the role that you're hiring for. Now, one of the cool things, having come to Needcrime recently, I use it all the time because we're growing our team. So I'm looking for engineers, I'm looking for product managers, UX, UI designers, etc. And I've been doing this for 20 years. When you reach out to people and ask them to consider your new role, especially in the startup world where maybe you haven't proven out your product market fit, whatever it might be, it's hard to get them to respond. Because we spend so much time vetting these candidates and making sure they're ready for change, we're actually experiencing 90% response rates from candidates, which is something that I think is really, really sort of mind-blowing. Because usually you reach out and you might get a 10 or 15% hit rate on anybody getting back to you. But because they are actively looking, and with our sorts, we're able to present them with positions that really match their skill sets, people are understanding that it's a great fit. Right now, don't worry, the commercial's almost over, but we are in all these cities, and they make sense because this is where most of the top tech talent is, and we're expanding into global markets as well. But here locally, let's look at ODrive in Cupertino. We talked to them recently about their experience. They were using sort of the typical things. They were using AngelList, going to meetups, and trying to find people to match their roles, and they weren't making very many hires. Since they got on Prime, because we're able to use that technology sort and relevance matching much better, they've been able to make 5 hires in the last 2 months. And they've actually had an 83% response rate when they reach out to candidates. So, retaining talent. Today's candidates tend to optimize for happiness. What does that mean? Well, we're talking about highly sought after candidates. So there are obviously going to be things like salary and location that will always be really important. But making a choice when you are sort of in control means you get to look at more factors and facets on where you want to spend the next part of your career. Location and flexible hours have been things that people really care about when choosing a job. And flexible work arrangements are on the rise. These are basically probably all of you, especially if you're in software, have seen this change over the years. Back when people used to build companies in the Industrial Revolution, for example, building a factory was high capital intensive. You built a company somewhere and people came to you for those jobs. In this era, things have changed. If I could. The location of talent is actually determining the location of jobs. This is actually just a slide of Google's 70 offices across the world. So it's kind of creating what we're calling a virtuous cycle here. So the war for talent creates a situation in which where top talent want to live, talent migrates there, companies open there, and you have this sort of perfect storm of jobs and talented people. I've seen this in Austin. I mean, when we were starting to hire people back in 2004 in Austin, it was really, really difficult to get people to build your teams. We brought people from California, we brought people from wherever we could to start building out our companies. But as those companies grew, and there was more and more talent in the mix, it was easier to build up teams, which created an environment for more startups, more companies. And today we even have offices from Google, Facebook, Apple, and more, because that sort of concentration of talent has become a reality in Austin, as it has been in the Bay Area for many years. So if salary, location, all that stuff is taken care of, how are people deciding what they're going to make their choices on? A lot of this comes down to meaningful work and your work environment. In fact, 8 out of 10 people say they would turn down a big salary if it meant working at a company that they really didn't want to be a part of. People are talking about make sure your company is one of the it places to work. Well, how do you do that? Software developers are looking for more than ping pong tables and open spaces. That used to kind of be the thing 15, 20 years ago, but it's never really been the thing. The thing has always been meaningful work, intellectual challenge. Am I going to learn new skills? Do I feel ownership over this product? And does my work have real world impact? I've worked with a lot of folks over the years, and the ones that are most successful are always the ones that are looking to develop themselves and looking for opportunities in which they're given that environment. And so from the candidate side, that's something that everybody should be looking for. What's my next role? Is this going to be, am I going to be growing? Am I going to be challenged? Is it something I care about? And from the employer side, are you creating that environment to make sure that people are learning, that they're given the ability to grow and change? Those of you guys who have startups know that today's software developer is tomorrow's product manager. Tomorrow's product manager could be your next VP of marketing. So these are environments that need to be created to make sure that people are growing and learning. That's how you really can retain your top talent. So how do we do it? So here's a couple of ways we do it. In addition to sort of flexible PTO, many locations, flexible hours, it's really about creating a risk-taking environment where it's okay to fail. Last week alone, for example, I looked this up, we had over 500 A/B tests. Now those A/B tests aren't all coming from product managers and senior leadership. There's just too many. So what does that mean? It means that people are getting ideas out there and they're testing them. 70% of those fail, and that's okay. But you have to try, because oftentimes you're going to learn more from the things that you get wrong than you got right out of the box. Certainty is the enemy of innovation. You have to dream and you have to have a vision, but you also have to test against it and make sure that you're learning along the way. So to really double down on this, we've created something called Indeed University, which is really a crash course in product development. It's an incubator within the company. People right out of college, no experience with sort of the hiring space, etc., but who have ideas are encouraged to take those ideas into Indeed University and take time to build it and launch it and see if they can prove that concept. I think in terms of the startup conference, that's probably an experience that a lot of you have had. I know that when I started UShip, for example, when we started that, none of us came from shipping. We didn't know anything about it, but we learned and we applied sort of web-enabled solutions and used our own logic to try to create something new. And that's probably what most of you all who have startups here are doing. And so this has been really interesting. 5 of the 11 original projects graduated, which means they got funding and they're continuing to be built upon. And while some really didn't think this was going to work, it did. In fact, our help wanted searches is a really good example. This was a tool that people are literally going around with their phones, taking pictures of help wanted signs all over the world, and loading those jobs up into Indeed. And we turned it into a product called JobSpotter. And the cool thing about JobSpotter is that right now, help wanted has become the #2 search term on Indeed. And that all started with an idea that people had saying, hey, I see help wanted signs all the time. Those people aren't posting those jobs online, but they're real, and there are a lot of them, so it's really interesting. So one of the other ways we're trying to create retention is, from our development standpoint, is we have multiple development centers. And this is Indeed's a big company. The key thing here is to avoid groupthink. So even within your startups, are you moving people from one product to another? Are you always getting fresh eyes? Are you having people bringing different perspectives? With our company, for example, our Seattle office has a lot of developers who've worked at large companies because of Seattle. Our San Francisco and Austin offices have a lot of folks that have worked at startups. So both viewpoints are really valid. And can you have them work together to bring a rounder solution, a more full solution to the table? This helps avoid the pitfalls of groupthink. And this is a key thing in people feeling like they're always growing and learning. Regional strengths can broaden your perspective if you're large enough, but I think even within the smaller companies, it's really about mobility. So let's kind of reframe the finding and retaining top talent. So one of the things that's clear, we have to look outside the box for top talent. These stats are interesting, right? For those of the people that are in tech today, almost half of them don't have a computer science degree, and only a third of them even ever took a computer science course. So we're talking about reskilling people moving from one space to another. 2, pay attention to your recruiting process. This is important. We all know all the tools that are out there, but in the age of employer reviews, candidates can check out how your company is treating employees. Employees are doing this research, and they're sharing this. In fact, candidates share their positive and negative experiences on their hiring process at a very high rate. So it's really important that even if you have folks in your pipeline that may not end up on your team, that you are really paying attention to what that process looks like, because you could be keeping yourself from future talent. Right now, reading negative reviews is the #1 thing that would keep someone from joining your company. And this is specifically true as you get into candidates who are highly, highly sought after. Lastly, get back to your candidates quickly. This is something that is hard to do. I know for those of you running startups, you don't have recruiters, you don't have HR departments. It's hard to keep up with when you put a job rec out there. Just even getting back to everybody becomes a whole thing. It's a really tough thing to do, but it's important. Because right now, according to our stats, this is the #1 frustration for job seekers. And more than half of them are not getting responded to within weeks and months. And so it's important to find a way when you open up job recs to make sure you're paying attention to this process. Even if you don't have a whole bunch of job openings, every single person who applies could be impacting the quality of the candidate you end up filling the role with. So another way is to gather insights at a low cost. You know, with Needcrime, I'm lucky I can use it to find new employees, and so I'm kind of always dog fooding my product. But there's easy ways to do that within your own organizations, right? Apply to your own jobs, uncover things that can be improved. Find out what is the average response time. Is it 2 weeks? Probably not so good. So work with your team to give them more support to respond to people more quickly. Audit the communications for tone. You know, all these things matter, right? These are people who are highly sought after. So the way you treat them is going to be a big part of whether or not they think they want to come be a part of your mission. And then talk to them. Gather input from the candidates going through their hiring journey. What did they like? What they didn't like? Whether or not they end up on your team or not, it's important to ask these questions. Third, and I think this is a big one, accelerate skill development. There's a perception that people fear change. You know, things are changing at a rapid pace. Technology is taking out traditional jobs in all sorts of industries. However, 84% of employees say they're excited about changes that technology will bring. And even more exciting is that 85% of these employees said they would take their own time to invest in these new skill sets. This is kind of an overlooked thing. You know, I think in the world at large, we are always bombarded with, oh, people will be sort of not willing to change, not willing to learn. But that's not really true, and especially when we're talking about the types of candidates in these tech roles we're talking about today. And what's good about this is that it really allows for company leaders to paint a picture of the future that's coming and talk about what it's going to take to meet that future, what skills are going to be needed, you know, which direction do we need to go in. By 2020, more than a third of the desired skill sets for most jobs will be comprised of skills not yet considered crucial today. Things change very quickly. So, you know, folks that are experts in what technology is today, if they're not looking about what's next, they might not be ready for the future. So embrace reskilling top to bottom in your organization. Make sure you have pathways for learning, that you have mentorship programs, that you are moving people around so that they can develop themselves, because by developing them, you're developing your organization's capabilities. Build a culture where learning is a way of life. I think this is why most of folks are in this conference. Part of being part of a startup is trying new things, failing, winning, learning. This is how innovation is created. So make sure that's part of your company culture, whether big or small. It's hard to do at both levels, but it's an important thing to pay attention to. And help your employees manage their careers. Make sure you're paying attention to your people. They're your most important asset in the world in which we're living today. At Indeed, we help people get jobs. Good luck for all your future endeavors, building your teams, and changing the world. Thanks a lot.